us. So I guess I will just check the time real quickly. Looks like it's 1 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started then. My name is Fullmer. In the mundane world, I'm known as Giovanni IL Ratto in the SCA. I am a Master of Defense. I have been studying Rapier in the SCA for about 13 and a half, going on 14 years now. So it's kind of been a passion of mine since I was a little kid. I was fortunate enough to have a mother who fenced before I did, who got me addicted to the swords. So shout out to Kindwin, thank you for that. So I'm going to look at questions as they come up. I'm going on my second phone, which has quite the delay on it, so I'll try to get to your questions as I can, but I may be a little bit spotty when I can get to those. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So the art of defense. This is something that people have been studying for hundreds of years. Different period masters, different people who have gone through. It's evolved into Olympic fencing that we have today. It's a great, great pastime, and the point of this class is to try to break down some of the basics that go into it, as well as looking at the theory as to why do those things work. For those of you that have been around for a little while, this may seem a little bit boring to you and kind of a refresher, because I'm going to start from the ground up and go forward, getting into the advanced techniques a little bit later on. But the important thing is, if you don't have a solid base and a solid basic technique, you're not going to go very far with this, because you have to build up that foundation in order to get to the upper levels. So, and it's one of those things that you need to practice to where those basic things become muscle memory and second thoughts to you. So, when it comes to fighting, in my opinion, now this is all my opinion, I could be wrong. It may work differently for the way that you fight or the way that your body type is. Every fencer and every fighter is completely different. So these are just things that I've noticed that have worked for me and seem, technically sound for what works for me. So, in my opinion, there are 3 things that are either going to win or lose a fight. Number 1 is measure. Measure is the distance between you and your opponent. If you're too far away, obviously you're not going to hit your opponent and they're not going to hit you. So measure is going to be one of the things that determine a fight. Number 2 is going to be sword placement. In layman's terms, if you've got good sword placement, you've gathered the line and you've been able to come in, typically you're going to have good sword placement, you're going to win that fight. If you've got bad sword placement and then your opponent has good sword placement, well then obviously you're going to lose that fight. And number 3 is tempo. Tempo is the measurement of time. Tempo is the measurement of how long it takes to make a movement. So there are long tempos, short tempos, things like that. So depending on who moves at what time will determine whether or not you win the sword fight. Now, I'm still working on getting all 3 of those things to work together. Sometimes I'll have good sword placement, I'll have great measure, but my tempo was off, or other way around. So we'll start talking about those things later on, but the thing that you need to think of is how far away you are from your opponent, who has the best sword placement, and who used the time correctly in order to win that fight. So, going on, let's talk about measuring. The best way to manipulate measure is to have proper footwork. So let's go and let's kind of get into our stances and different things, because measure, once again, determines how far you are from your opponent. So when it comes down to the way I like to stand is typically I'll go into a width, my feet that are about a shoulder width apart all the way down. I like my heels to be on the same line that they're at. From here, I'll kind of sit into it. Now, when I say sit into it, that doesn't mean that I'm just going to lean completely back with my backs all the way back here. No. When I'm sitting into it, I'm sitting in and I'm rotating my pelvis down just a tiny bit, so that way my weight is evenly distributed between my 2 legs. So let's say I'm facing my opponent. I'm right-handed most of the time. For lefties, I'm sure you're used to this. Try to do the opposite of what I'm doing, but for your left hand. So I'll sit into my horse stance, as they call it in karate, or just feet shoulder width apart. And then from here, I'll take my right leg, if you're right-handed, your left leg if you're left-handed, and I'm going to take my heel. My heel is going to be my pivot point where I rotate my leg, my toes, 90 degrees out. And then from here, I'll sit into it. So what happens is when I bring my legs straight back, I'm making a right angle with my heels touching, but my toes pointing out. You know, I may be in a ballet studio, but this isn't, a lot of times when people are doing this, they'll go into first position. So they're back here, and they'll come here into first, or even a modified second. That's not what we're wanting to do. Because what happens is, if you've got that leg stepped out, if your legs are crossed, you're not going to be able to move the way that you wanted to. So you want to have your heel, I've got this nice line right here, your heels meet, and then even they can be slightly separated just a little bit, so that way when you're forward. And then what you're going to do is you're going to sit in, kind of plie in. Once again, we're not, you know, just completely leaning back. We're sitting into it, rotating our pelvis just a tiny bit, so that way we can come into our proper stance. So this is where you get into differences of opinion between period masters. You know, Capoeira, a lot of people think that he's all the way back here in his stances. And a lot of times he does show that play, but that's more for he's going into a defensive position, because now his leg is ready to spring when we go for a lunge. Gigante is all the way forward because he's trying to make himself small. I like to kind of go in between the two of them. The most important thing is when you get into that stance is that you have your weight fairly distributed between your two legs. I'd say no more than 60-40 on each leg. The reason being, when you come into stance, I typically like to fight a little bit forward because I'm tucking my pelvis down in and my center of gravity is still in between my 2 feet. So that way, when I come forward, it's here. The biggest thing that you're looking for is I should be able to move my feet in any direction that I want and still be evenly distributed. Because the problem is if you're all the way back here, let's say you're back here into the Capoeira stance. If you need to retreat, you're going to have a major problem because you have to bring the weight off of your back foot, center it between your 2 feet before you can move backwards in a retreat. Same thing is if you're all the way forward, you can really go back quite a bit, but if you want to go forward, you have to remove the weight in order to move that forward. So when you're in your stance, try to distribute your weight fairly evenly. So from here, let's go into the different guards. I personally, I like to have gloves on whenever I'm handling my swords just because it feels weird not to have gloves on. So just a second here. So, measure, going back to the measure thing. So the best way that you can manipulate and change your measure is by having proper footwork. So that's going into your stance. The reason why I'm going to go into my guards right now is because you want to be able to practice how your guards are while you're doing your footwork. So we'll circle back to the footwork thing. So, with guards, you've got, typically there are 4 standard ones that most people will use. You've got prima, which is up, secunda, which is basically 90 degrees to your right, terza, which is straight forward, and corta. A lot of times I like to go into a modified second and third. It's not quite all the way up into second, it's not all the way down to third, it's somewhere in between. Just because I like where that line of defense is going for me, and I'll typically have a dagger. We'll get into that later though. The biggest mistake people make when they're looking at their guards is, I call it chicken winging, where they get really lazy and their elbow is basically up against their body. The problem that this does is it's really difficult to actually have proper sword stance. You can see my entire arm is now just a lovely target for people to snipe. So what you want to do is, instead of having it all the way back here, you're going to bring it forward just a little bit. So now what's happening is, when I'm forward like this, you have much less of a target on my arm and less of a target for my entire body. I'm going to rotate over so that way I'm not presenting my chest. I'm going to rotate over here so that way I've got this nice line covering what I'm doing. So now we're going to get into how can we manipulate, measure with footwork. Number one is being able to do proper advances and retreats. So there are typically two ways that you can do footwork for advances and retreats. So we're going to get back into our stance, move that leg over, sit into it, and make sure that my weight is evenly distributed. I'm going to bring my sword online. And once again, I'm going to make sure that I'm not chicken winging it. I've got my blade out to cover this line. From here, typically, my feet were a little wide there. Typically, there are two ways that people do advances. I like to kind of sit on the balls of my feet just a little bit. You don't want to be completely up, but you want to have a nice little spring going on. So you've got the typical, I'm going to move forward and do the heel toe, front leg moving forward, dragging your back leg, and then vice versa. When you're going forward, you want your front leg to go first. When you're moving back, you want your back leg to go first. So there's that option. That's typically good for when you're getting into lunges, things like that. I like to do what I call a gathering step, is where if I'm here, I'm going to bring my back foot forward, and then I'm going to go for my lunge. So you can do it where you're doing that, retreats. Whenever you're moving side to side or laterally, you want to make sure that you're not really crossing your feet. Because the second you cross your feet, you're no longer on balance, and your opponent has the opportunity to attack at you and take you out. So, if you're going to move side to side, whatever way you're moving, that foot needs to go. So if I'm moving to the left, my left foot needs to move so that way I'm not crossing over. Vice versa with my right. If I'm moving to the right, I'm going to move my right foot over and bring it to here. So never cross your feet. The same thing can be said when it comes to when you're moving forward. A lot of times, if you haven't killed your opponent in one, maybe two steps, you no longer have control of that fight typically. You should get out of there. Don't keep pressing the matter. So we'll talk more about that later. Another thing that is so vital and important is that you are pointing your toe. My students and people around me in my area all know that this is something that I will harp on day in and day out, is pointing your toe. The reason why is because your knee is a 90-degree joint. It's not designed, it's only designed to go one way. It's not designed to move this way. And if you are stepping when you're lunging and you step really bad and you see how pigeon-toed my foot is, and you're putting a lot of pressure, you're putting tons of pressure on your ligaments here. And over time, that will mess up your knees with fencing. So prolonging your fencing career, you want to make sure that you've got proper direction on your knees to be able to handle that. Another thing that comes into play there is if you think of pointing your toe, your tip, your sword tip is going to go that direction. A lot of times when I go forward, and my toe is pointed properly, that's where my point is. If it's off to the side, your body wants to naturally follow the line of where your knee and toe is pointing, so that way it doesn't hurt itself. So what will happen is over time, your point, I'll be a little bit exaggerated on this, but your point will follow that, and you may be off in your point control just a little bit. So the biggest thing is that you make sure that your knee and your toe are pointed in the direction that you want to go. My pro boats will attest to this. I will harp on everybody and anybody who's not pointing their toe correctly when they're doing drills or when they're fighting in a tournament or even melee. Point your toes, because it will save your knees tons of pain in the future. So, a little bit of footwork. So now, we're going to go into our stance and we're going to practice just a little bit moving and making sure that we're moving in the direction, or we're moving the foot in the direction that we're going first. Something to keep in mind. when you're moving to the side, you want to try to cover that line and move your sword into the, see, I didn't want to jump. So when I'm taking that move, I also move with my right foot first. So when I'm making that move, what I'm doing is I'm moving my sword to cover that line to get myself into a defensive position. And this is, when we talk about tempo, this is more important because of that. So, bottom line is, when you move, make sure you're covering the line with your sword, so that way you can protect yourself. Because by making that movement, my sword is no longer where it needs to be, so I need to do something to try and get it to where I'm protected. So, there's footwork. So, now let's talk about how we can manipulate our measure based off of footwork. In a lot of ways, especially in sports fencing, it's a very linear path. Actually, let's go and see if we've got any questions on anything. So, just so you all know, I do have quite a bit of a delay from my second phone to the video. And if I'm moving too fast, try to let me know. Sorry, I've never really taught before, so this has been interesting. Let's see. Thanks, Nicolina. That's a very good point. Okay, it doesn't look like there's many questions here, so I'm just going to continue on. Okay, so let's talk about manipulating better with our footwork. That needs to go on side. So in period rapier, it is not going to be as linear as sport fencing or strip fencing. Because we can use the different planes in order to manipulate our swords to get the position that we want. So, what's one way to do that is moving offline. Now, the thing to remember about moving offline, and you'll see a lot of people where they'll start coming here and they'll start circling each other. And what they're doing is they're jockeying for position, they're jockeying to get good sword placement. So, let's say your opponent is doing that. Well, let's talk about how far you have to be to kill your opponent. So, the back foot, doesn't matter right-handed or left-handed, your back foot is going to determine how far away you are from the person you're going to kill. Because typically when you do a lunge, if you're doing a period lunge, your back foot is planted, and that's where that, I can only reach so far with my back foot where it is. So your back foot determines your kill measure or your kill range. Your front foot determines how close you are to death, because that person who is moving away, you're making it farther for that person to tag you, and how close you are depends on your front foot. So, let's talk about circling and manipulating the measure. So, when you're doing this, whenever you take a diagonal step, you are closing the distance and closing the measure on your opponent. So right now, just putting my arm straight out, I'm not close enough to my opponent to kill them. However, if I were to take a diagonal step, all of a sudden I am. All I did is I went 6 inches to the left. And there I am within measure to be able to attack them. Same concept over here. I could be here, and I could step. Boom, I'm right there. So the important thing to note is that you want to be the person controlling the fight, and you want to be the person that's determining that measure. If people are stepping up to you, you want to try to mirror that, but in the opposite direction. So what you're going to do is, let's say my opponent stepped forward at a diagonal, and now I'm in a position to where they can stab me. All I did was moved maybe 6 inches to the right diagonally up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to counter that by stepping back. Now, I'm not within that measure for them to be able to stab me. Manipulating measure is one of these wonderful things. There could be different times where, let's say, I'm really not comfortable with doing this full-out lunge to be able to stab my opponent. However, if I come on this side, I've gained that line, and I decide to go for a diagonal lunge, I can still hit this person, and they didn't necessarily expect it because they're thinking, oh, well, he's far enough away that he can't really, I can step to hit him with a full lunge, but my diagonal is just enough to be able to get that, to close that measure. So that's something to play with. Now, in order to do that, let's talk about gaining the blade. So this is that second portion where it's called sword position. Sword position is extremely important when it comes to especially period manuals. There are a lot of different styles within the SCA. I like to have sword contact whenever I'm fighting my opponent. I like to have that contact on the blade. I like to try to gain control of the line, gain control of the position. There are other people that like to play accents of blade, and so they're relying more on their quick speed in order to get those shots a lot of times. Yes, they'll have different defenses and different things that go into it, but a lot of accents of blade, you have to be able to move your tip quick enough in order to score those points. So the way I like to play is I like to play blade on blade contact, gaining the blade. So there are a couple things that are very important that you gotta look at. So number one is true edge and false edge. So your true edge is typically going to be your knuckles, the edge that line up with your knuckles going down the sword. Your false edge is going to be the line or the edge of the sword that follows your thumb. Now the importance of this, if you've got a shared table, anything like that, I want you to grab your sword and go up to it. And when you put your sword on top, notice how much more pressure you can do when you're pushing down, and I'm trying to force it down through the tip of my blade. There's a lot more power to that. Whereas when you put it on, if you put your tip underneath and try to pull up, you'll notice how much harder, how much strain you've got to put to apply the same amount of pressure trying to lift or push down that object. The same thing applies for somebody's sword. Physics is a wonderful thing. This is where we get into levers. So, whenever I'm trying to gain the blade, I want to try and have my true edge on top of my opponent's false edge, because it's so much easier for me to manipulate and move when I have those things. Whereas if I'm using my false edge, it's really just not as powerful to be able to do that. So this goes into, let's go back a little bit to our footwork. So what I'm doing is currently, if I were to move, and let's say I'm going to move to the left, I move to my left a little bit, what I have done is I have given my opponent my blade, because now his true edge is on my false edge. And he would be able to, or they would be able to bat my sword down much easier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to disengage the fazione around, and now what I've done is I have given myself the advantage again, because I have given away my false edge, coming up, putting my strong edge onto them, and being able to manipulate that lever. This also ties into when you're trying to move with purpose. A lot of times when I've got, beginner to mid-level fighters that are starting to come up and they're starting to learn how to talk with the rapier, they're starting to learn some proper technique and different things, they'll come out here and they'll be, oh, I've got your sword here, now I'm going to move over here, and I've got your sword here, now I'm going to move over to here. The problem with that is they're giving me so much opportunity to stab them because they're not moving with a purpose. You know, in the art of defense, you want to expand the least amount of energy that you can in order to kill your opponent. Because the more movement, the more tempos that you give them, the more of an opportunity that you are going to die. Because they're going to block those and continue and then continue on. So this is going into the concept of moving with purpose. So let's go back to that example. Let's say that I moved to the right or to the left and I didn't move my sword. I've made a stupid movement because I didn't move with purpose. I didn't do anything to gain the blade. Once I gain that blade, then step in and move in on my opponent. Or do it in a fluid motion. Try to make it fluid. You don't want to chop up your movements because the more you chop up your movements, the more you're going to telegraph your opponent that you're about to do something. So moving with purpose is something that you really want to try to do. And this is where drills and practicing different guards, different movements, shadow boxing, shadow fighting, where, okay, one of the best things that you can do is grab a friend of yours, making sure that you're using proper technique, proper footwork, go through and go, okay, if I come here, I'm going to move my blade here. Pause just a second, point your toe. What do we need to do to get out of this? Did I leave my blade here to where they have the true edge and they've gained my blade and can push through? Or have I done it properly and gained their blade to be able to move forward and get that kill? So moving with purpose is very important to do. So now that we've talked a little bit about movement, let's go into the hierarchy of speed. So the fastest thing that you have for movement is the tip of your sword. That is going to be the thing that's going to move the fastest. So that's why you'll see a lot of people, they'll move, disengage, move here, cuts, different things like that. The tip of your sword is the thing that moves the fastest. The second fastest is going to be your wrist. Most of your sword handling, most of your tip control is going to be coming from your wrist. Then it moves from your arm for the second or third fastest thing, and then your body is the fourth quickest or slowest thing that's going to move. Now, this comes down to when you're blocking things. Obviously, your tip is going to move the fastest. Your wrist, your hilt, your arm, that's where you're starting to get a lot of your blocks and things coming from. However, especially if you are fighting a long sword, grab my long sword out. Your tip might be the fastest thing, but you want to leave it on your opponent when you're making your blocks. So when you're making your blocks, this is, this is where your bread and butter is going to come from. The tip needs to stay on your opponent. The reason why is because of long swords, because they're so long, it takes so much more effort and power to move the tip of my sword because of how far out it is than it does to move my wrist. So you're going to get a much stronger, more powerful block if you block with the hilt of your sword, with the long sword, than you are with the tip. So let's see, where was I going with that? So hierarchy of speed, we can start getting into lunges. In fact, let's break the lunge down. So the period lunge, typically what's going to happen is you're going to have your sword, blade on your opponent. Typically, you don't want, when you take your lunge, you don't want to set more than maybe 1.5 foot length. So my foot's right here. I got this lovely line right here. Typically, my heel is going to end up, that's a pretty wide lunge to begin with. And my foot has only traveled maybe a foot's length, if that. And then I'm going to bend through my knee, come through here. So that's what your feet are doing. However, that's not where your lunge should start. Your lunge should start with the tip of your sword and your wrist. So what's happening is I've disengaged, I've got control of their blade now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my arm, follow that through, start with my body, because look, I haven't even stepped yet, and I'm close enough that I can tag my opponent. But the important thing of that is I need to be able to start with my arm, if that doesn't work, go with my body, and then, if I really have to, step. And the nice thing about this is I should have a straight line from the tip of my sword following down to the back of my foot. And you'll see how my foot is nice and straight and how far I've gone from my opponent. The importance of starting with your sword, arm, body is by the time that you move your foot, you had better be able to stab them or get out. So let's say I've started this lunge and they've got me blocked out and I realize this is not where I want to be. I haven't thrown all my cookies in the jar yet because I haven't moved my foot. The second you lift up your foot, you are now no longer in control of being able to move back. So, once again, we're going to start all the way back here. Start with sword, body, lunge through. Let's try it and let's think of, oh crap, they just blocked me. So I start with, oh, I got too excited and started moving my foot. So, sword, body, nope. And I wanted to do something to try and manipulate and block where I'm moving back. So, just the concept I want you to think of is, if you're moving your foot, you have 100% committed to that lunge, you better get it. So that's just kind of a short lesson on lunges. Let's talk about defense now. So let's see if there's any questions on that. No streaming, no issues. No questions? Okay, we'll keep it going then. Alright, so now we're going to get into more of the defense side of things. This is where we're going to start picking up some secondary weapons. I preach the cone of defense. So what this is there will be a cone from the tip of your sword back to your hilt. And what that cone is let's say, it's what defends me. So the farther back you are from somebody, the smaller the cone of defense has to be. Let's see if I can keep my tip straight so that way it shows it. So it's from here, and it circles all the way around from the tip of your sword. The further away you are from an opponent, the smaller that cone of that sphere is going to be. The closer you are to that opponent, the wider that cone is going to be. So, that's why when you're a little bit further away from your opponent, your movements typically, that right there, all I did was move my wrist 3 inches, and that cone, that shot is now going to be coming past me. So let's see if I can get this as an example. Let's go on this side. So from here, if I were to go straight forward, that comes defense. If I'm all the way back, you see how far? And I just went straight forward. I didn't move that whatsoever. I shifted just a little bit. So if I bring that back out, that's my cone. So that's one thing that I like to think about when I'm defending is small movements the further they are. When they're closer, you have to make wider, bigger movements. Let's see, and that's the basic concept of the cone of defense. Now, when it comes to secondary weapons, let's get into that. fencing should come from single sword, especially when it comes to secondary weapons. I'm a fan of the Italian stance, where I've got my blade here. So now I'm going to go into a kind of different third, fourth position, and I've got my wrists are basically together, and I've got my dagger here. When I'm making a block, I should be trying to block with my single sword first, moving forward. If that still doesn't work, then I'm going to use my dagger to give myself a little bit of leverage to get that block. Some people like to have wider stances. Personally, I'm not a big fan of that just because I look at how much target I've got. The thing about, black tigers are very notorious for this, but they've got that shut down with lots and lots of practice. Me personally, I like to have that defense because what's happening is now, I can do a combined 3 and 4th or a 2 and 3 guard. And what I'm doing is, you might be able to get, my head, but the nice thing about that is I've got that right there. I've moved my arms together. The way I've done this is, I actually trained with handcuffs that bound my wrists together. They had a little bit of play, so that way they weren't completely shackled together, but they had a little bit of play. And what this does is it reminds me that if I'm going to windshield wiper my dagger out here, it forced my sword hand to come with me. You'll see a lot of people where when they're fighting, they'll go like this, and that's how they block. The problem with that is, let's say I missed that block. I'm in trouble. However, if I were to use my sword for that block, boom, even if they disengage again, I've got my dagger to be able to come over. Typically you don't want to cross, but you know what, there's always exceptions to the rule in situations. So let's go into talking about attacking them. So you've gained the blade, you've got this lovely shot, or let's say that you don't necessarily want to gain the blade on that particular pass. One of my favorite things to look for on opponents are seams in their defense. So this is kind of what I was talking about, people that have really wide stances or different things. They're giving me multiple seams and multiple opportunities to attack in. So when I've come here and I've got this, depending on which side their blade is on, this doesn't really give you much of a seam to work with. But let's say that I don't got my dagger or my sword in the proper position. Let's say I've got this wide a little bit. You see how there's this lovely seam right here in the middle that somebody could capitalize on? I don't have to come on straight forward. I can come in to the side, and there across again. Come into the side here. So when you're looking for different attacks, look for different seams in your opponent. The human brain, we've all heard of it, left side, right side. Same concept applies here, especially when you've got somebody who's not very familiar with how to block properly. My brain has been for years and years and years trained that if it's on the right side, I'm going to block with my right hand. If it's on the left side, I'm going to block with my left hand. So training your brain out of that is something important as far as your defense goes. But when you're attacking, look for that to exploit. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll call programming, where I'll throw the same shot 3 times. And I'm looking to see how that person is going to react, and I'm programming them, and I'm telling their brain, hey, I'm going to continue to do this. And I'm looking for an opportunity, or I'm looking for a seam in their defense to be able to go, okay, you did that, oh, left side. And just change the angle slightly enough to be able to go in for that kill. Let's see what else. That too slow on that, but if you want to, feel free to rewind this video. I've also been recording it on a separate camera, so that way I can post it onto YouTube if you guys are interested. So that kind of sums up most of the technique and the breaking down of things. Let's go over a couple of drills that people can do at home now. So, let's see. All right, actually, let's see if anybody has any questions from there. Is that about it? Okay, no questions? Perfect. Okay, so going over a couple of drills. Footwork, footwork, footwork is the most important thing that you can do for your fencing career. Having proper footwork will just make so much of a difference. So when you're practicing, practice doesn't make perfect if it's perfect practicing. So we want to make sure that we are in a proper stance, that we are distributing our weight evenly between our feet, and we're just going to drill being able to move without crossing our feet. Now let's talk about our back foot, gathering or gaining the gaining step. Boom, boom, left, right. So when you're taking a couple steps, I want you to stop, freeze completely, look down at your feet. How wide are they? Are they too wide? Where's your toe at? I can't tell you how many times people will start going, and they look down at their feet and they see that the toe is completely moved out. Pivot from your heel, point that in the correct direction. Another thing I noticed is that if I were to bring my foot completely back, look at how my heel is almost to my toe. I did not take proper steps. I was not using proper footwork. If I sit into my footwork and I'm doing things properly, moving that back, my heel's to my heel, and that's where I want it to be. Another thing that you want to look at when you're doing your drills is you don't want any rise and fall with your shoulders. This is a huge, huge tell for your opponent to be able to stab you if they see you rising up and down on attack. When you're doing your footwork, all of this work needs to be in your thighs. If your shoulders are moving up and down, you're doing it incorrectly. So, get into your stance. I like to practice with my sword out just because that's going to, help with my muscles, maintain my muscles. Also, it's giving me good muscle memory for where my guards are. So I'm in my proper stance. Got it out. I'm not chicken winging my blade. My blade is out where it's supposed to be. And you'll notice that my shoulders are not going up and down hardly at all. Especially dancers, people who do the waltz, it's not a rise and fall. It's strategic. It's movement. You're not expending energy, lifting up and down. Another good drill for tip control. Let's talk on tip control just a little bit more. Tip control isn't necessarily where on my opponent can I stab them where I want my tip to go. Tip control also comes down to how hard am I stabbing my opponent? Where is my tip going to end at the end of my lunge? Something to think about when you're doing your tip control. I don't have it set up right now, but there will be times where I've got a tennis ball on a string that's about, yay high or so, and I'll take my sword, and it's just like a cat playing with this toy. I'll just poke and try to hit the ball, just so that way I can be used to targeting where I want things to go. One trick for tip control is with your sword. A lot of times when I'm holding my sword, my finger I'll bring this forward. When I'm holding my sword, my finger does go through the trigger. Some people like to do 2 fingers, some people like to do 1. Personally, I prefer 1. But when I'm holding my sword, a lot of times I'm holding it between my ring finger and my thumb, and my pointer finger is there to help control where I'm going. So I think of it as I'm just going to point my finger, and a lot of times that's where your tip is going to go. A lot of people will really hammer and hold on to it like they're chopping wood or something like that. You don't want to do that. I heard it explained that you want to, it's like you've got a bird in your hand. You want to hold it with enough strength to not let it go, but not so hard that you're going to crush it. Same concept for your sword. Be nice and gentle with it. Add strength when you need to, but most of the time let it flow. And your wrist is where you want most of your movement for your tip coming through. So, a trick on cavaciones or disengages. Go up to a doorknob, especially if it's the round doorknob, and what you'll do is you're going to, with as little movement as you can from your wrist, you're going to take your tip of your sword and you're going to circle around it. So this is really exaggerated. If it's all the way out here, you really don't, that's taking more tempo, it's taking more time. So short distances, and I like to go from one side. Okay, well, I'm going to go on top this time, or on bottom, type of thing. Once I've done that for about 10-15 minutes, switch to your offhand, and oof, I need to practice with my left. And you want to start practicing with both hands to help you guide that. So, I think that about sums it up. Thank you for those who've watched. I'm sorry if I went a little bit fast. It's, I don't typically do class settings like this very much, especially when I'm by myself and just can ramble on. My friends can attest I do that a lot, but in different context. So thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I will be posting this video on YouTube as well, so that way if people are interested, they can take a look at that, slow it down, rewind it, and break through it. Thank you very much.